Bruce Lee hadn't come to the gym that day to challenge anyone. He hadn't even come to prove himself to anyone. For him, training was a personal thing, almost private. He paused at the gym door and took in the atmosphere inside for a second, the sound of heavy iron, plates crunching on the ground, and the smell of sweat and ego in the air. This was a place where size spoke volumes, where body weight defined you, and where people asked for scale first, skill second. Bruce Lee's physique was a stark contrast to this environment. A slender frame, tight muscles, but no bulk. Simple clothes, no flashy shoes, no gloves. There was no hurry in his gait. He entered slowly, as if he knew this place wouldn't accept him, and he didn't mind. People stared at him for a few seconds, then went back to their workouts. For him, it was just another outsider. There was a man in the middle of the gym who was the most visible, a very heavy build, about 300 pounds, chest broad, arms tight, and a voice so loud the entire floor could be heard. When he lifted weights, people would watch. When he laughed, people would react. He was the unofficial alpha of that gym. He saw Bruce Lee, first one look, then the other. Then he laughed, the kind of laugh that insults. "This is a gym," he said, "not a yoga class." Some people laughed, some just watched. No one intervened, because this was normal in this type of gym. The weak were tested, the small were pushed. Bruce Lee said nothing, no smile, no anger, just a deep breath. He didn't move toward the bodybuilder. He stayed in his place. This is something that some people find strange, because normally there is a reaction to insults. There was no reaction here. Bruce Lee walks toward the weight area. He picks up the plates, touches the bar. His approach is completely different. He doesn't lift the weight with force. He first sets his grip, then his posture. His focus is on movement, not muscle. Only trained eyes can see this, and there were few trained eyes in this gym. The bodybuilder speaks again. "You won't last long here." His words were heavy, but his conviction was even heavier. Bruce Lee remained silent. This silence created a tension, because silence is often not a weakness. Sometimes silence is a decision. Bruce moves from his seat. He finds a clear space on the floor. He doesn't pick up his bag or put on gloves. He simply sets his position. At this moment, the energy of the gym begins to shift. People don't understand what's about to happen, but it feels like something is about to happen. The bodybuilder steps forward, with size, with confidence. And here, that moment is coming where not only the difference in muscles, but also the difference in understanding is about to come to the fore. The air inside the gym had grown thicker. The sound of the iron was still audible, but not as normal as before. It was as if every sound had become a little slower. People were busy with their workouts, but their eyes were repeatedly shifting to the small Asian man who was moving in a completely different way. There was no rush in Bruce Lee's movements, no haste, no hesitation. He moved exactly the way he moved everywhere, controlled, measured, aware. The bodybuilder was still watching him. For him, this wasn't just an outsider. This was an opportunity, a moment where size establishes its authority. He finished his set, threw the barbell hard onto the rack, and rolled his shoulders. His body spoke, and he felt like only bodies were heard here. He took 2 steps toward Bruce. With each step, his shadow grew heavier. Bruce Lee noticed it, but didn't react. He stood his ground, breathing normally. This is the moment when most people can't control their ego. They either respond or retreat. Bruce Lee did neither. He simply adjusted his position slightly. Most people wouldn't have noticed such a small adjustment, but this adjustment made his balance perfect. The bodybuilder started speaking again. This time his voice was louder. "You think he's a fighter?" he said, looking around. "He's just a bundle of bones." Some laughed. Some gave awkward smiles. The laughter was more of discomfort than support, because deep inside everyone felt that this joke wasn't going to remain just a joke. Bruce Lee's expression remained unchanged. No anger in his eyes, no smile on his lips, just focus, as if he'd heard it all before. And in fact, he had heard it. Everywhere, in every city, in every culture. Questions about size, doubts about power, laughter about reality. Bruce Lee never responded to these things with words, because for him, words were the slowest thing. The bodybuilder came closer. Now they were only a few feet apart. The size difference was even more noticeable at this close distance. People were wondering if things would escalate or if someone would intervene. But no one intervened because everyone wanted to see what would happen next. It's human nature. When tension builds, people want to see the outcome.
Bruce Lee looked at the floor, as if he was measuring the space. This movement also confused people, because normally when someone gets intimidated, they break eye contact. Here, breaking eye contact was not intimidation, it was calculation. Bruce Lee spread his legs slightly, but the stance was not one of fighting. The stance was natural, balanced, ready. The bodybuilder raised his hand, not for a punch, just a gesture, as if to show how heavy he was. "What is your weight?" he asked. Bruce Lee didn't answer. This silence made more people uncomfortable, because the silence no longer felt merely calm. The silence now felt like a decision. At this moment, some experienced people in the gym realized that this scene was not normal. There are some things that only instincts recognize. Bruce Lee's body language was saying that this exchange wouldn't end with words, and the bodybuilder's posture was saying that he wouldn't back down now. And then there came that tiny second, that second that people remember later only because it changed everything. Bruce Lee slowed his breathing further. He took his eyes off the bodybuilder and focused on his center. Not the chest, not the face, the center. This is where balance is decided. The gym was now completely silent. The iron had stopped. The people had stopped. Only two bodies were ready for movement. And what was about to happen wasn't just a test of muscle. It was a test of understanding. The moment had arrived where the next movement wouldn't just be part of the workout. There was no dramatic punch after that second, no flying kick, no movie-style move, and perhaps that's why what happened was all the more disturbing, because for those who believe only in power and size, the most terrifying thing is someone who doesn't follow their rules. Bruce Lee didn't make the first move, at least not in a way that most people would understand. He simply shifted his weight slightly, very slightly, almost imperceptibly. But with that shift, the bodybuilder's balance shifted. He himself didn't understand what had happened. He simply felt that his feet weren't planted on the ground as before. The bodybuilder instinctively tried to strengthen his position. The chest and shoulders tightened further. This is the reaction that heavy people give when they feel that control is slipping. But this reaction made the situation worse, because when you are already in imbalance and you tense your body further, you destroy your flexibility. Bruce Lee now raised his hand, not for a punch, not even for a grab, just for contact. His fingertips touched the bodybuilder's forearm, just a touch, but with that touch, Bruce changed his angle. The bodybuilder felt as if his body wasn't yielding to him, as if someone was tugging at his center. This pull wasn't from force, it was from leverage. In the next 2 seconds, the bodybuilder's entire confidence had collapsed. He tried to back away, but even that was impossible without control. One of his feet didn't land properly. His shoulder tilted slightly. And then something happened that rarely happens in the gym. The guy who had always been dominant had to reset his position. Bruce Lee stopped everything right there. He didn't push. He didn't continue. He didn't make the bodybuilder fall, because making him fall wasn't the point. The point was that the message was clear. Size only matters when you have balance, and you only have balance when you control your center. The bodybuilder retreated 2 steps. This retreat wasn't a retreat, it was a survival reflex. There wasn't anger on his face, there was confusion. This confusion was new to him, because for the first time in his life, he felt that someone could overpower him without force. There was no noise in the gym anymore. No one was laughing, no one was commenting. People who had previously been impressed by the muscles were now looking at Bruce Lee's feet, because they had realized that this game isn't about arms and chests, it's about positioning. The bodybuilder tried to say something, maybe a joke, maybe an excuse, but no words came out, because when the ego is hurt, words are slow to come. Bruce Lee looked at him with a look that held neither insult nor victory, just calm confirmation. Bruce Lee took his place again, as if nothing had happened. This was the most uncomfortable thing of all, because normally when a moment happens, there's drama after it. There was no drama here. There was only a silent conclusion. The gym owner stepped forward and said, "That's enough for today." This sentence is normally said at the end of a workout, but here it meant something else. Training had ended, not just because anyone was injured, but because the entire gym hierarchy had been reset. And when a hierarchy is reset, people need time to adjust. Bruce Lee picked up his bag. He didn't look at anyone, didn't talk to anyone. He left the gym. The bodybuilder remained in his place.
His hands were still tight, but his mind had loosened. He had realized that size isn't everything, and that's often the hardest thing to understand. So the next moment didn't just end the session, it ended a myth. As Bruce Lee left the gym, the atmosphere felt completely empty. It wasn't that the people weren't there, but rather that the energy had vanished. The iron was still there, the machines were still there, but the earlier sense of dominance had vanished. People remained in their places, but their minds were still stuck in that small moment that had changed everything. Often in life, it's not the big things that have the greatest impact, but the small moments that change your thinking. The bodybuilder squirmed in his seat. He opened and closed his hands, as if trying to feel his body again. For him, this wasn't just an awkward moment, it was an identity shock. He'd believed his entire life that size and strength were the ultimate truth. And when that truth cracks in a split second, the pain isn't physical, it's mental. Around him, people were watching him, but this time there wasn't admiration in their eyes, there was a question in their eyes. Some gym regulars tried to talk things out. Some said it was just technique, others said it was luck, but these things are all for self-comfort. Deep down, everyone knew that what happened was more than technique and luck. It was a difference in understanding. And a difference in understanding is more dangerous because it challenges your entire training philosophy. The gym owner didn't talk to anyone about that day afterward. He offered no explanation. He simply changed the schedule and gave a reason for the early close. But people noticed that after that day, the gym's rules changed slightly. The clowning decreased, the loud jokes decreased. People started focusing more on their workouts. It was as if everyone understood that if a small man, regardless of size, could shake an entire hierarchy, then it was foolish to underestimate him. Bruce Lee never mentioned this incident, not in interviews, not with friends. This was also an important point, because people who turn every victory into a story are often hiding insecurities. Bruce Lee didn't need to convince anyone. For him, it was just another example of what he always said, that control is more important than power, and awareness is more important than control. That bodybuilder later changed his training approach. This wasn't openly stated, but people felt it. He stretched more than before. He did movement drills. He worked on his balance. This wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was proof that when a person realizes their limitations, they either break down or evolved. And here, evolution had begun. This incident also had a more subtle impact. When new people came to the gym, they weren't tested like before. First, they were asked for their size. Now, more people asked, "What are you working on?" This question seems small, but behind it there's a whole mentality shift. This shift occurred simply because one day the size failed. For Bruce Lee, this moment wasn't like a trophy. It wasn't even comparable to a medal, but it was a silent confirmation for him. What he'd been thinking for years wasn't just theory. It was practical, it was real, and most importantly, it was repeatable, anywhere, in any environment, when someone would rely solely on their strengths and ignore awareness. When people hear this story today, they often take it as an exaggeration because movies have turned Bruce Lee into a myth. But the real Bruce Lee wasn't a myth. He was methodical, and methodical people can achieve dramatic results without dramatic things. That's why this story isn't loud. That's why this story doesn't feel like a viral fight. But that's why this story is remembered for a long time. The gym was closed that day, but what really closed was a single thought. Everything happens as a result of that thought, and when a thought is shut down, space is created for new ideas. Bruce Lee created that space without letting anyone down, without hurting anyone,
without insulting anyone, just through a single moment. And perhaps that's why the biggest impact of that day was that no one ever underestimated Bruce Lee in that gym again. And even those who didn't know him understood that some people may look small, but are actually very large. There was no official fight at the gym that day. There was no knockdown, no ambulance arrived, no viral clip. But what happened was deeper than a fight, because in a fight the body wins, whereas here the mind had won. Bruce Lee's #1 weapon that day was not his punches, kicks, or speed. His #1 weapon was his clarity. This is what the power of clarity means and what control means. Bruce Lee always said that true strength lies not in muscles, but in balance. And balance isn't just about the body, it's also about the mind.
A person who relies solely on their strengths eventually becomes a testament to that strength. And a person who understands their weaknesses survives in every situation. What happened in that gym was a living example of this. That bodybuilder wasn't wrong. He applied what he learned. But his training was poor because he ignored movement. He ignored awareness. Bruce Lee didn't explain all this to him in a single lecture. He showed it in a single moment. And often a single moment is more powerful than 1,000 words. For Bruce Lee, this wasn't a victory moment. That's why he never mentioned it. He never said, "I won," because for him, winning wasn't the point. The point was that if a system is based on just one thing, it's doomed to fail, whether that system is boxing, bodybuilding, or life. Even today, when people go to the gym, they look at size first. They judge muscles first. But those who look a little deeper, they first see movement. They see balance. They see awareness. And Bruce Lee left this thought there without saying a word that day. The biggest lesson of this story isn't that a small man can defeat a tall man. The lesson of this story is that a person who understands himself doesn't have to fear understanding others. Bruce Lee didn't silence those who mocked his size. He simply showed that when you understand yourself, the world automatically falls silent. And maybe that's why only the session did not end that day. That day, even a single wrong thought came to an end.